In the heart of a forgotten forest, nestled between the sacred hills of Nkara, lies a grave no soul dares tread upon. But when 4 spirited youths laughed at the warnings of the old, choosing thrill over tradition, they danced where only the dead belonged. What awakened that night had slept for centuries. To the outsider, it was just another West African settlement. Mud brick huts lining dusty paths, smoke spiraling into the sky from evening fires, children chasing chickens with glee. But to those born of Nkara's soil, it was a place balanced delicately on the edge of the living and the dead. At the center of this balance was Ojukwa's Rest, a grave that had not been touched in over 300 years. Shrouded by a ring of twisted baobab trees and marked with cowrie shells buried deep in the earth, the elders warned it was more than a grave. It was a door best left shut. No one knew exactly what lay beneath the grave. Some said it was the body of Ojukwu the Bone-Eater, a priest-turned-sorcerer who had betrayed the ancestors by consuming the flesh of the dead. Others claimed it was the tomb of a child born with 7 eyes, buried alive when the villagers could not bear his gaze. But one thing was clear: you did not go near Ojukwa's Rest. You did not speak its name after sunset. You certainly did not dance upon it. But 4 teenagers from Nkara had grown tired of tales and taboos. It began with a dare. "I'm telling you it's all nonsense," said Tiga, the loudest and proudest of the group. His voice cracked with the arrogance of youth, his hands flailing dramatically as he balanced a calabash of palm wine. Amma, the quiet one, glanced nervously at the forest's edge. "My grandmother says she once heard crying from the grave, like something trapped under the soil, begging." "Your grandmother also thinks rainbows are messages from witches," Kojo scoffed. "Come on." Zinzi, the 4th, leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "What if we go there? Just for fun. One night. We bring a drum, a lantern, and we dance. Nothing happens, we prove them wrong. If something does happen, well, at least it's a good story." Tiga slapped his palm against the ground. "It's settled. Tomorrow night. We dance on Ojukwa's grave." None of them noticed the old woman sitting behind the mango tree just a few feet away. Her back bent like a crescent moon, her eyes wide and glassy. She did not speak, but her lips moved silently, repeating something again and again. "Do not wake what dreams in dirt." The night they chose was moonless. The air was too still, too warm for comfort. Even the insects were silent, as if nature itself had stepped back to let something else pass. They met just outside the market square. Tiga carried a drum slung over his shoulder. Zinzi had a rusted lantern. Kojo brought firewater in a gourd, and Amma, reluctantly, held a calabash filled with white chalk for body markings, a ritual mimicry meant to mock the old ways. They took the back path, one usually reserved for funeral processions. The very earth felt different there, looser, like memory itself had been buried beneath every step. As they entered the forest, Amma whispered, "We shouldn't do this." Kojo laughed. "Too late now, Amma. Just make sure you don't trip on any ghost bones." The lantern's glow flickered unnaturally. When they reached the clearing, it was as though they had stepped into another world. The grave was marked by nothing more than a mound of slightly raised earth, but the grass around it was withered and gray. The baobab trees circled it like mourners. A strange chill clung to the air despite the heat. Zinzi walked straight into the center and placed the lantern atop the mound. "This is it," she said, almost disappointed. "Doesn't look like much." Tiga began to beat the drum, softly at first, then faster. The rhythm echoed between the trees, bouncing strangely, almost as if another drum was answering in the distance. Zinzi began to sway, her ankles kicking up dust. Kojo joined in, clapping. Even Amma, drawn by the strange pull of the beat, began to hum a low tone she didn't recognize. And so they danced. First it felt exhilarating, almost electric. The fear was replaced with adrenaline, then laughter. Their movements grew wilder, more unhinged, as if something had entered their limbs and taken control. But then the ground shuddered. Just a little. A pulse like the earth had coughed. The lantern flickered. Tiga stopped drumming. Amma stood still, her breath catching in her throat. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Zinzi's eyes were wide. "The grave, it's breathing." Indeed, the mound seemed to rise, ever so slightly, and then fall. Again and again. Suddenly, the chalk in Amma's calabash turned black. Kojo dropped his gourd. From the trees, a sound rose, a chorus of whispers, old voices not meant for young ears. They did not speak in any known tongue, but every word carried weight, slicing through the night like blades. "Dancers of the flesh, feeders of the gate. Your bones are borrowed, your joy stolen." The trees creaked forward, limbs twisting like skeletal arms. The lantern went out. Darkness swallowed them. They tried to run. Zinzi tripped first. Something caught her ankle, not a root, not a vine. Something wet and cold and impossible. She screamed, but it came out muffled, as if swallowed by the ground. Tiga reached for her, but his hands went through the air where she had been. She was gone. As if she had never been there. "Amma!" Tiga shouted. "Kojo! We have to." From the center of the grave, a shape emerged. Unnatural. Drenched in the mud of centuries. Its face was hidden behind a mask of thorns and bone, its chest heaving, ribs exposed and wrapped in charms. It was neither alive nor dead, and it moved like it remembered pain. Kojo tried to strike it with a burning stick, but the flame died the moment it touched the air near the creature. Then the beast sang. A guttural, echoing note, like the mourning of all buried things. It wasn't loud, but it pierced their minds like hot iron. Tiga dropped the drum and covered his ears. Blood leaked from Kojo's nose. Amma screamed. Ran. And the forest shifted to let her through. By dawn, the villagers found only one of them. Amma, curled beneath the sacred fig tree, whispering incoherently. Her hair had turned snow-white. Her hands were coated in the same black chalk that had filled the calabash. She kept mumbling one sentence. "We shouldn't have danced, he wasn't asleep, he was waiting." Zinzi was never found. Kojo's body was discovered days later. His mouth full of soil, his eyes open, pupils missing. Tiga returned 2 weeks later, but not as himself. The villagers said he laughed too much. He walked into the river one morning and never resurfaced. The elders gathered and redrew the protection circle around Ojakwa's rest, pouring goat blood into the earth and whispering names too ancient for the wind to carry. But the forest never forgot the dance. And at night sometimes the drums still echo from deep within the trees. No one goes to listen. Not anymore. It had been 5 days since Amma was found. She had not spoken anything coherent since the night she fled Ojakwa's rest. She was housed in the shrine hut near the outskirts of Nkara, under the watch of the old spiritual matron, Mama Esh. No one else would go near her. Her hair, once thick, black and braided with beads, was now snow-white, brittle like dried corn husks. Her eyes flicked about constantly, as if watching things only she could see. She muttered ancient words in broken rhythm, many of which not even Mama Esh recognized. The elders gathered each dawn outside the shrine, whispering among themselves. "She's cursed," one said. "She brought something back," said another. "She should be buried alive, before it takes the rest of us." But Mama Esh, who had walked the fine line between life and spirit for over 70 years, saw something different. "She didn't bring something back," she told them. "She's still connected to what was left behind." Inside the hut, Amma began to dream. But these were not ordinary dreams. In them, she stood at the edge of the grave again. Only this time she wasn't dancing. She was floating. Her feet hovered above the mound as smoke spiraled from the ground like fingers searching for skin. From beneath, the voice returned. "Amma, my dancer of flesh. Finish the dance." She would jolt awake each time, drenched in sweat, crying out names. "Zinzi. Tiga. Don't listen to him." And sometimes she would whisper things no child should know. The gate wasn't sealed. The bones weren't satisfied. The debt wasn't paid. One night, Mama Esh prepared a ritual bath with bitter leaf, ashes of sacred yam peel, and crushed kola nut. She placed Amma in the steaming basin and began chanting a cleansing incantation in Ogbo, the tongue of the old spirits. Amma went stiff. Then suddenly she screamed, her voice not her own. "You danced. You mocked the ground. And now the ground hungers." The hut walls shook. Fireflies fled the trees outside. The basin water turned black. Mama Esh dropped her gourd in terror. For the first time in decades, she feared for the village. 3 nights later, the drums returned. But not from human hands. At exactly midnight, as the wind stilled and the stars dimmed, the sound came again. Faint at first, then clearer. A single beat, then another, then many. They echoed from deep within the forbidden forest, toward Ojukwa's rest. The rhythm was strange. Not celebratory. Not funereal. It was summoning. Men clutched their wives. Children cried in their sleep. Goats broke free from their pens, howling like they'd seen fire crawl from the soil. The village bell rang, though no one had touched it. Amma stood up on her own for the first time in days. She walked barefoot out of the shrine and stood in the center of the village. Her voice was eerily calm. "He's calling." The drum skin was made from his brother's back. We danced on his hunger. Now he wants to dance in our skin. Mama Esh ran after her. "Amma, come back. Child, the spirit's grip is still on you." But Amma turned slowly and said, "He's not in me anymore. He's coming through me." That same night, miles away from the village, a merchant caravan traveling the old Ankara trade route stumbled upon something, or rather someone. Near the cracked stone bridge over River Isai, they found a girl walking naked through the reeds. Her face was pale, her feet bloodied, and her eyes were glassy. She was whispering names. When they approached, she lunged at one of the donkeys, biting into its flank before being pulled away by 3 men. They brought her to a nearby town, and a healer there recognized her face from a sketch posted by Ankara family weeks earlier. It was Zinzi, but not the Zinzi they remembered. She could not speak more than one sentence. "The dance isn't over. The dance isn't over. The dance isn't over." And her back was covered in symbols carved deep into her flesh, symbols no healer or priest could identify. Spirals, eyes, and clawed hands twisted in rows down her spine. When Amma heard of Zinzi's return, she wept. Not from joy, but from dread. She was meant to stay behind. He marked her. "She's the drum now." The elders finally agreed to act. They summoned the last living bone keeper, a reclusive man named Polo, who lived in isolation beyond the Yam Hills. Polo was no ordinary priest. He was said to have seen the inside of death during a burial gone wrong in his youth, and ever since had been able to speak to the ancestors without ceremony. When he entered the village, birds fell dead from the trees. He looked at Amma for 5 long minutes and then turned to Mama Esh. She opened the gate. But she is not the key. The key still beats in the earth. And the dead want to dance again. He took a calabash from his satchel and poured red sand into a circle. Then, using a chicken's foot, he scratched 3 marks into the soil. Spiral. Tear. A jagged line. These are the signs of Ojukwa's hunger. The forbidden grave was a lid. It is now a mouth. The villagers stared in horror. Polo added, "And that mouth is speaking names. One by one." He turned to the elders. Who else was there that night? Of the 4 dancers, Zinzi had returned, though broken. Amma had escaped, but at what cost? Kojo had been buried. His body twisted, his tongue missing. Only one was left unaccounted for. Tiga. Until the night the rains came. It hadn't rained in Kara for weeks, but now the skies poured as if the heavens themselves wished to scrub the earth clean. Thunder rolled like giants drumming on hollow mountains. And just before sunrise, a child fetching water near the northern well screamed. Tiga stood there, naked, soaked, his eyes glowing faintly red. His mouth was full of dirt, but he was smiling. He said only one thing. I saw what dances under the earth. And it saw me. Then he collapsed. When Kpolo examined him, he declared, "This is not Tiga. It is a vessel, a walking shrine. We have little time." The ancient shrine in the center of Ankara had long been a place of blessing, a place where marriages were sanctified, crops prayed over, and newborns named under the presence of the ancestors. But something had changed. Early one morning, Mama Esh was offering palm oil and feathers at the altar when she heard it, a crack, faint but deliberate, coming from below the shrine floor. She knelt, placing her ear against the warm clay. It wasn't her heartbeat. The ground was pulsing. She scraped back the mat of dried palm leaves, revealing something that hadn't been there before. A spiral symbol, identical to the one carved on Zinzi's back, burned into the clay with no sign of fire. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "The earth is listening now." In the council house, Kpolo addressed the gathered elders. His face looked older, as if years had settled into his skin since the last moon. His fingers, stained from rituals, tapped on the bone staff carved with stories of forgotten gods. "There is no more if," he said. "The gate has opened. But you still do not understand what was behind it." He told them of the legend kept secret for generations, a story not even Mama Esh knew in full. Long ago, before Ankara bore its name, the land was ruled by a being not quite spirit, not quite God, Ojukwu the Binder. It was said he could twist the living into any shape, bind souls to trees, and make rivers run backward. When the ancestors rose against him, they could not kill him, only imprison him beneath the earth, under a grave sealed with 13 bodies and 13 taboo songs. The final taboo was the dance. No one was to ever dance on the land again, Polo explained. For the rhythm is what feeds him. The rhythm wakes him. One of the elders asked, "So, what do we do now?" Polo looked into the fire and answered grimly, "You must undo the dance. But to do so you must descend into the place where bones dream." Amma had grown quieter, but her vision stronger. Each night she would speak in tongues from before the ancestors. She began sketching in the dirt with her fingers, shapes of gates, symbols of birth and death, and eyes that bled salt. One night, she rose suddenly and walked into the village square. The moon was high and blood-tinged. She bent down and began dancing again, but this time not out of joy. It was a slow, shuddering motion, like a puppet being moved by unseen strings. Mama Esh and Kpolo watched from afar. "She's entering the trance," Kpolo said. "Not willingly. The rhythm is inside her now." As Amma spun one last time, she fell to the ground and began speaking with a voice that shook the trees. "The bones are remembering. The gate has eyes. The key is in the mouth of the liar buried with gold teeth." Kpolo's eyes widened. "That's it," he muttered. "The grave robber. The one buried beyond Ojukwu's rest." Mamesh gasped. "You mean Idumo?" Polo nodded. "He stole sacred things and died with them in his belly. He was buried facing downward so the spirits wouldn't follow him. But Amma's vision says his mouth holds the key to resealing the grave." A search party was quickly formed. Polo, Mama Esh, 3 brave hunters, and Amma, who insisted on coming. They set out for the edge of the cursed forest, torches lit and charms tied to their chests. The wind grew colder as they approached the burial mound of Idumo. Even the insects refused to make sound here. They found the spot, a mound covered in cursed thorn grass, marked with a broken stone slab etched with teeth-like carvings. Polo began the digging. After 2 hours, their shovels hit wood. When they pried the coffin open, they recoiled. Idumo's corpse was mostly intact, preserved by some unnatural force. His jaw was locked tight, but between his lips, they could see something shimmering. Amma reached down before anyone could stop her. She pulled it out, a golden tooth sharp as a blade, covered in script too ancient to read. The ground suddenly rumbled. Amma fell backward, gasping, as the air filled with a sound none of them expected. Laughter. Soft at first, then louder, then guttural. But it wasn't from above. It was beneath their feet. That night, back in the village, strange things began to happen. First, one of the hunters who helped retrieve the tooth began sleepwalking, chanting and scratching spirals into his own skin with his fingernails. Then 2 goats were found mutilated, their limbs arranged in the form of dancing stick figures. Then, Tiga disappeared. He was last seen standing at the edge of the well where Amma first spoke in riddles. When the villagers found him again hours later, he was floating inside the well, alive but unconscious, a strange smile on his face. Polo examined him and whispered, "The spirits want hosts. The drums are no longer just calling. They are entering." The golden tooth, now kept in a calabash surrounded by salt and sacred ash, began to hum, faint but constant, and Amma, eyes glowing faintly, began preparing for the journey none of them wanted to take. "We must go beneath the rest, into the dance hall of bones. Only there can the rhythm be reversed." With the village under siege by shadow and madness, a final group was formed to enter the grave's depths. Amma, Kpolo, Mama Esh, the 2 remaining hunters, and Zinzi, who, though mute, had begun reacting strongly to the drums, as if guided by instinct. The path to the forbidden grave was treacherous. Thorns grew overnight across their trail. Baboons screamed from the trees but vanished when approached. The trees themselves seemed to twist, leaning in as if to eavesdrop. At last, they stood before Ojukwa's rest. But it no longer looked like a grave. It had changed. Now the mound had sunk, revealing a spiraling staircase made of bone and stone, leading downward into darkness. Amma stepped forward. "She's leading the dance," Mama Esh whispered. "She is no longer the victim. She is the bridge." One by one they descended. Each step down felt like a century. And beneath, the drums waited, louder, deeper, calling from a chamber where death had never been silent. In the belly of the earth, where ancient crimes slumbered and bones whispered lullabies of hunger, the living had come to make peace, or be devoured. But peace would not come easily. The drums had been fed, and now they demanded a final dance. The staircase spiraled downward, deeper than the roots of any known tree. As the group descended, the torches in their hands flickered not from wind, but from something colder, a presence. The deeper they went, the more their surroundings changed. The walls, once rough stone, were now lined with skulls, hundreds, perhaps thousands, stacked in precise geometric patterns. Some bore markings. Others had teeth that didn't belong to any human. Zinzi, silent as ever, began to hum. Her voice, though soft, matched the beat of the distant drums. Mama Esh's grip tightened on her charm bundle. "We are inside the rhythm now," she whispered. "We must move carefully, or the dance will use us." Suddenly, Amma dropped to her knees. Her body convulsed once, twice, and then settled. But when she looked up, her eyes were no longer hers. "Welcome, children," a voice rasped from her lips. "You have walked the dance of death, but have yet to pay the toll." Polo raised his staff, ready to strike. "What possesses her?" he shouted. The voice inside Amma's body grinned. "I am not a demon. I am not a ghost. I am the memory of the first rhythm. I am the drummer who danced with gods before the sky opened." Zinzi stepped forward. Her arms rose as if in recognition. The spirit continued. "She is a vessel now. As you all must be. For Ojukwa sleeps no longer. He listens and he watches." A shudder passed through the chamber, and from behind a wall of bones a door opened, one made of stretched skin, taut and pulsing with light underneath. The voice in Amma's body spoke one final time. "Enter and play your part. Or remain here," echoes without rhythm. Amma collapsed unconscious. The group stared at one another. Polo stepped forward first. "We finish what we started. Or this tale ends not with us, but with every child born after us cursed by our fear." The chamber beyond the skin door was a massive cavern, lit by flames that floated midair, casting no shadows. In its center, a stone drum the size of a hut. Around it danced figures made of dust and memory, the past dancers of the forbidden grave. They spun in endless circles, faces blank, but limbs graceful. And above them all, suspended in roots like a sleeping spider, was Ojukwu. His body was skeletal but immense. His limbs stretched like vines. His head covered in a crown of thorns and silver. But his eyes, they were open, barely, watching, waiting. Amma stirred again, rising slowly. "He is almost fully awake," she said. "The dance is completing itself. We must break the circle." "How?" one hunter asked. Kpolo pulled the golden tooth from his pouch. "By playing a counter-rhythm, one that unbinds." The villagers formed a circle around the stone drum. Kpolo placed the golden tooth in the center. Amma began to chant low, guttural words in the first tongue. As she chanted, the floating dancers shuddered. Zinzi, eyes glowing faintly, began to drum with her hands, slow, offbeat. The hunters joined, forming a rhythm against the existing one. And that's when Ojukwu twitched. A single limb snapped downward like a whip, sending shockwaves across the floor. The chamber moaned. The dust dancers screamed in unison and charged the circle. Each dancer reached for their flesh counterparts, trying to pull them into the eternal motion. One hunter was caught and began to spin violently, bones cracking as he mimicked the cursed dance. Mama Esh acted fast, throwing red chalk into the air and slashing her blade through the spectral figure, breaking its form just long enough for the hunter to collapse, alive but broken. Kpolo yelled, "Keep the rhythm. Even if you bleed, keep the beat." Amma's chant rose higher. Zinzi's drumming grew furious. The golden tooth began to glow. And above them, Ojukwu's eyes fully opened. When Ojukwu rose, it was not with force, but with gravity. The entire chamber bent toward him as if the earth were bowing. His mouth opened and no sound came out. Yet everyone fell to their knees, screaming. The silence was unbearable. It tore through memory and thought. Amma screamed, "He's taking language. He's taking names." Mama Esh gritted her teeth and chanted the name of the earth, anchoring them. Kpolo lifted the tooth above his head and struck the stone drum. A sound erupted, not of drum but of shattering glass and burning fire. The rhythm changed. Ojukwu screamed, not in rage but in pain. And then he descended. Limbs lashing, face contorted into the memory of every ancestor who had died in terror. Zinzi ran into the center of the chamber. She began to dance. But this was not the forbidden dance. It was something older, something purer. A binding dance once used by women in the rain temples to summon protection. She danced with power. She danced with sorrow. She danced with intent. Ojukwu reached for her, but every time his shadow touched her, it recoiled, burned by her rhythm. Amma joined in. Mama Esh clapped her hands in sync. Kpolo chanted and poured salt in a perfect spiral around the golden tooth. The two remaining hunters drew blood from their palms and painted the floor. It was working. The stone drum cracked. Ojukwu's form began to stutter. One moment flesh, the next smoke, then bone. The walls screamed. The skulls wailed. And finally, with one last shudder, Zinzi leapt, landed on the golden tooth and screamed. "Return to dust, breaker of peace." A burst of white fire erupted from the tooth, engulfing the chamber. All went silent. The return to Omalani was unlike any the village had seen. The once lost returned from the grave forest not just alive, but altered. The hunters bore haunted stares, their eyes flicking at unseen shadows. Zinzi walked silently, no longer humming. Amma whispered names in her sleep, names no one in the village recognized. But Mama Esh, she remained still as a mountain, guarding a truth she had not yet shared. That night, the elders prepared a cleansing fire. The group sat around it, but the flames gave no warmth. "I no longer hear the drums," Polo said. "But I feel their absence, as if they are still listening." Mamesh nodded. "Because they are. You quieted the god. But you didn't destroy him. You awakened his memory." Amma trembled. Then why are we still here? Esh answered. Because now he needs you. Zinzi had barely spoken since the cavern. She wandered the village at night, stopping often to stare at graves. One morning the chief's son screamed. His father's grave had been disturbed, the dirt upturned, the headstone shattered. But nothing had been taken. Zinzi stood by the tree line, barefooted, mud-stained, whispering something over and over. Amma approached her. What are you saying? Zinzi blinked, then answered in a voice that wasn't hers. The dead are rising, not to walk but to remember. They remember the dancers. They remember you. She collapsed. Amma saw it then, on Zinzi's neck, a faint mark reappearing. The spiral. The villagers called an emergency council. Mama Esh reluctantly stood before them. The forbidden grave was not just a place of death. It was once a prison. The drum is not a relic. It is a lock. Ojakwu was bound beneath it long before our grandmothers told stories. But the dance? One elder asked. What was it for? To contain him, Esh replied. The rhythm kept him dreaming. But when the dance is mocked, when it is performed in pride instead of reverence, he stirs. She looked at Polo, Amma, and the others. You went where no living soul was meant to return. And now, you are the cracks in the drum. That night the wind changed. It no longer rustled. It rattled like beads in a calabash. Children cried in their sleep. Livestock fled. And every grave in Omalani throbbed like a heartbeat. Amma ran through the village, looking for Zinzi. She found her standing before a newly dug grave. He's choosing now, Zinzi whispered. Those who forgot the rhythm. Those who danced without knowing the price. Suddenly, a low sound rolled through the earth. A drumbeat, deep and slow, felt in the spine before the ears. The hunters emerged, weapons drawn. Kolo held his blade tight. This time we do not go to him. This time we bring the fight here. But Mama Esh shook her head. You cannot fight rhythm with steel. We need the counterdance. We need a rhythm of binding again. Amma turned to her. Then teach me. By moonlight, the villagers gathered in the sacred circle. Mama Esh placed 7 stones, each carved with the name of an ancestor, around the fire. We do not summon him, she said. We summon his keepers. Those who held him before. Their rhythm still exists in our blood. Amma took her place in the center. Zinzi joined, spiraling with each step. The hunters formed a perimeter. Not with weapons but with silence. She began to drum. A slow, sacred rhythm that had not been heard in centuries. As the rhythm built, the earth responded. From the trees, they came. Ghosts, not terrifying but familiar. Women in ancient beads. Men with white painted faces. As closed bodies swaying. The ancestors. They entered the circle, one by one, and joined the dance. And then Ojakwu arrived. Not in form but in pressure. A weight upon every chest. A voice that hummed beneath the skin. You called, he whispered through Zinzi. I called to end you, Amma responded, her feet tracing the sacred geometry in the dirt. No, the voice said, amused. You called to join me. Time slowed. Amma stood between 2 rhythms. One old and binding, the other seductive and wild. Ojakwu offered power. Knowledge of death, of time, of spirits. Let the dance never end, he said. And you will never fear. Amma faltered. But then Zinzi, still herself, spoke. A dance that never ends, is a curse, not a gift. Mama Esh shouted. Finish the step. Amma raised her arms, spun once, then slammed her heel into the spiral carved in the soil. The ancestors clapped in unison. The air rippled. Zinzi fell to the ground, convulsing once. The rhythm snapped. And just like that the drumbeat stopped. Utter silence. The fire snuffed itself out. When dawn came the village was still. Zinzi awoke, free at last from the mark. Amma wept beside her. Mama Esh, old and tired, handed Amma a new charm. You are keeper now, she said. The rhythm remains asleep, Because you remember the price. Polo looked out to the forest. Will he return? Esh smiled, but it was not joyful. Only if we forget. Only if another child laughs where he should listen. The forbidden grave isn't sealed by fear. It's sealed by respect. The villagers buried their drums that day. And every year on the night of their return they danced, not to honor Ojukwu, but to remember why they must never forget him. In African tales, the dead do not stay buried by stone alone. They rest when we honor rhythm, memory, and consequence. So remember this. If ever you hear a drum with no drummer, step carefully. Because some rhythms, once awakened, never stop.